You don't just walk into a small-town courtroom with the world watching, unless you have something bigger to prove. The sun hadn't even cleared the horizon when Bozeman, Montana, was already buzzing like a power grid. This wasn't the kind of town where international news happened. It was the kind of place where the biggest scandal in months might be a pothole that took too long to fix or the mayor's dog chasing a mailman. But not today. Today, Elon Musk was standing trial. Not in Washington, not in Silicon Valley, but here, in a courthouse nestled between snow-capped mountains and wheat fields. It was surreal, almost theatrical. The Tesla, SpaceX, and X, formerly Twitter, Titan now stood at the center of a legal storm that felt more like a movie than real life. And that's exactly what Judge Evelyn Carter hated most about it. She had served 27 years on the bench, seen drug lords, domestic abuse, corporate fraud, but she never expected this. Not here. Not in the town she grew up in. Not in her courtroom, with news vans and satellites outside and reporters whispering her name like it was trending. But there he was, Elon Musk. Tall, sharp-suited, and calm in a way that unnerved most people. He entered like someone walking into a meeting he'd already won. The gallery was full. Every seat taken. Every breath held. "Mr. Musk," Judge Carter said firmly, her voice calm but clear, "you understand the seriousness of this hearing?" Musk gave the slightest nod. "I understand that what I do matters. That's why I'm here." It wasn't arrogance, though it was close. It was certainty. He knew the world was watching. That every word he spoke would become a headline. Carter didn't flinch. "This is not the world. This is my courtroom." The charges weren't simple. He had been accused of violating public regulation laws surrounding AI deployment without federal approval and allegedly using influence to suppress online dissent through back-end data manipulation. The evidence was murky, the implications massive. But the law was still the law. And Carter had no intention of letting fame tip her scales. What made the trial even more unexpected was the testimony of Anya Rivera, a 28-year-old activist and founder of VoiceNet, a nonprofit watchdog organization dedicated to protecting digital free speech and exposing algorithmic manipulation. Her group had unintentionally uncovered back-end irregularities linked to X while researching biased content suppression. She never intended to take on Elon Musk. She just wanted the truth. When she took the stand, she looked like she barely belonged in the courtroom. Wavy dark hair, a second-hand blazer, and sneakers. Not polished, just real. Her voice was soft, but each word struck like truth hammered on steel. "I'm not here to take anyone down," Anya said. But when we looked at the data, it didn't lie. Someone was controlling the narrative, and we traced it back to X. Musk's eyes narrowed. He didn't interrupt. But the courtroom could feel the temperature rise a few degrees. Carter looked between them, two forces from different worlds. One born in tech royalty. The other in community centers and public libraries. "You realize the weight of this accusation?" Carter asked. Anya nodded. "I do. But people have been silenced. What we say online shapes how we live offline. If we can't question the voices we hear, or don't hear, then what's the point of having a voice at all?" That silence that followed didn't feel like defeat. It felt like something bigger. And for the first time since entering the courtroom, Elon Musk blinked. The session adjourned, but the conversation was only beginning. As cameras flashed outside the courthouse, a reporter shouted, "Elon, do you think you'll lose this one?" Musk stopped. Just for a second. Then with a small smirk, he replied, "I don't lose. I learn." He stepped into the black SUV waiting for him, and the door slammed shut like a warning shot to the world. But inside the courthouse, Judge Carter remained seated. Her gavel untouched. Her eyes distant. Because what was unfolding wasn't just a trial. It was a battle for something deeper. Not just about truth, but about who gets to define it. You can silence a room, but not the questions that echo after. 3 days into the trial, the tone had shifted. It no longer felt like a legal proceeding, it felt like a reckoning. Elon Musk sat in his usual position, hands folded on the table, face unreadable. He wasn't just defending his actions. He was fighting for an idea that progress sometimes required bending rules. Breaking them, even. But Judge Evelyn Carter wasn't having it. "This is a courtroom, Mr. Musk," she said for the second time that morning, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. "Not a platform." "With all due respect, Judge," Elon replied, adjusting his tie with the subtle elegance of a CEO who's pitched ideas to presidents and prime ministers, "the platforms are in here now." He pointed toward the gallery, toward the journalists, the live stream cameras, the millions of digital viewers. We're no longer in a world where justice is delivered behind closed doors. People are watching. They're asking questions. Shouldn't we be answering them? There was a beat of silence. Even Judge Carter paused, just briefly, as if absorbing the full weight of that challenge. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered. Not just those angry at Musk, but thousands who supported him. Some held signs that read "Freedom to innovate, don't muzzle the future," and "Code is speech." Anya Rivera watched it all from her hotel window. Her phone buzzed endlessly, messages, threats, praise, interviews. But one message stood out. "You think you're brave? You just lit a match in a room full of gas." She stared at the screen for a long time, her fingers trembling just slightly. She hadn't expected this. She thought speaking up was the right thing to do. Now, she wasn't sure if right and wrong even mattered anymore, only who had the louder microphone. Underscore 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 underscore. Back in court, Musk's defense leaned into their strategy, reframe him not as a rule breaker, but as a system challenger. A necessary disruptor. Elon Musk, his lead attorney said to the jury, isn't on trial for corruption. He's on trial for refusing to conform. For asking questions before the rest of us knew we had permission. The argument wasn't without merit. His companies had changed the world. Clean energy, commercial space travel, brain-computer interfaces. Musk had dreamed bigger than most and delivered what few dared to attempt. But the courtroom wasn't the NASDAQ. Judge Carter tightened her grip on the bench. "Vision," she said, "does not grant immunity. Especially when vision becomes blind to consequences." The words hit harder than expected. Because in that moment, something cracked in Musk's expression. Barely noticeable, but real. Maybe because, deep down, he knew she wasn't wrong. Underscore 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 underscore. Later that night, Anya received a knock on her hotel door. It wasn't media. It wasn't protesters. It was a young woman, early 20s, wearing a simple staff badge from the courthouse. I just wanted to say thank you," the girl whispered. "I watched the live stream. My brother's an engineer. He thinks Elon's a god. But I watched you speak, and it reminded me that truth doesn't always have a billion-dollar logo behind it." Anya didn't know what to say. She nodded, smiled softly, closed the door, and wept. Not from fear, but from the weight of being seen. Underscore 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 underscore. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Elon Musk took the stand, not as a defendant pushed into a corner, but as a man who wanted to speak, not to the court, but to the world. His voice was calm, slow, thoughtful. "Do you know how many times I've been told something couldn't be done?" he began. "That it wasn't allowed? That it broke protocol? Every breakthrough I've made started with someone saying you can't." He paused. "But I've also learned that just because you can do something doesn't always mean you should." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Even Judge Carter leaned back, visibly caught off guard. "I've spent decades building things to push humanity forward. And maybe somewhere along the way, I stopped asking who gets left behind when we move too fast." He looked toward Anya. And for a moment, nothing was said. But everything shifted. There's a moment, right before a system breaks, where silence grows louder than any scream. The air in Bozeman had shifted. Not just outside, where drones buzzed overhead capturing crowd shots for cable news, but inside the courthouse, where the real war was no longer between prosecution and defense. It was between story and silence. Between the future people feared and the past they no longer trusted. After Elon's testimony, social media exploded. Some called it the most powerful admission of responsibility from a billionaire ever caught on camera. Others said it was just another calculated move. But for the first time in days, Anya Rivera didn't check Twitter. Didn't refresh headlines. Didn't watch commentary videos. She sat on a bench behind the courthouse, earbuds off, phone off. Just breathing. "You good?" a voice asked. She looked up. To her surprise, it was Elon. No security. No entourage. Just him. Alone. "I didn't know you walked places," she replied flatly. He chuckled. "Most people don't know I listen either." There was a pause. A long one. Not awkward. Just weighty. "You didn't have to come talk to me," Anya said. "Didn't have to," Elon said, sitting beside her. "But after what I said in court, it felt dishonest not to." She looked at him, really looked at him, not as the mogul on magazine covers or the meme king of the internet, but as a man who, for a split second, had looked like he didn't have all the answers. "You changed the world, Elon," she said. "But you forgot the world isn't just made of rockets and algorithms. It's made of people." That struck something. His jaw clenched, just slightly. "You think I don't know that?" "I think you forgot," she whispered. Underscore 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 underscore. That afternoon, the courthouse was electric. Reporters filled every inch of the room. An unexpected hearing had been called. Judge Evelyn Carter had received a sealed report from the Federal Ethics Board. Rumors swirled that procedural irregularities had occurred, possibly implicating members of both the prosecution and Musk's own legal team in selective evidence handling. But that wasn't the shocker. The shocker was what Carter said next. "In light of new information, and in the interest of public trust," she said, looking straight at Elon and Anya, "both parties will be offered an opportunity for joint resolution. Not in the shadows, but here. Now. Before this court." Musk leaned forward. "You mean you'll both be given one final statement," Carter said. "Not as defendant and witness, but as voices in a public reckoning." You could have heard a pin drop. Underscore 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 underscore. Anya stood first. Her voice trembled, but only for a second. I was never trying to destroy Elon Musk, she began. I was trying to protect the space where ordinary people feel safe to speak. I believe in innovation. But innovation without accountability becomes something else entirely. And if someone like me, from a neighborhood where Wi-Fi is a privilege, can stand here and be heard, it means we're doing something right. She sat quietly. And then Elon rose. I've launched rockets that pierced the atmosphere, he said slowly. But none of them matter if the people on the ground don't feel seen. I'm not proud of everything that happened. But I'm not ashamed to admit that learning sometimes costs more than pride. If this trial taught me anything, it's that even giants have blind spots. For once, he didn't smirk. Didn't posture. He just looked human. Underscore 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 underscore. That night, Bozeman didn't sleep. Not because of protests or flashbulbs, but because something strange had happened in that courtroom. A billionaire admitted fault. A young activist offered grace. And a judge opened space for truth to rise above titles. By morning, polls had shifted again, not in favor of Musk or Anya, but in favor of dialogue. Hashtags like #TechIntruth and #VoicesNotVillains trended. News outlets pivoted from scandal to substance. Educators began discussing the trial in classrooms. Even boardrooms brought it up, not as gossip, but as a case study in 21st century ethics. For once, the internet wasn't talking about who won. It was talking about why we all needed to listen more. Sometimes the loudest verdict isn't the one spoken from the bench, it's the one whispered in your own conscience. Judge Evelyn Carter returned to the bench with a stillness that silenced the room. The kind of stillness that comes before a thunderstorm or a transformation. She didn't raise her gavel. She didn't look at her notes. She looked at them. Elon Musk, she began, you've stood here as a titan of industry, accused not just of actions, but of arrogance. You defended your intentions. You challenged this system. And in doing so, you revealed its cracks. Then she turned to Anya. Miss Rivera, you did not come here to win. You came to be heard. And in doing so, you gave this courtroom something it rarely sees, humility wrapped in truth. She paused, scanning the room. This trial will not end in a jail sentence. Nor will it end in dismissal. Because what the law couldn't resolve, the conversation did. A beat of silence. Mr. Musk, the court requires that you fund and support the creation of an independent watchdog group, co-led by nonprofit activists and tech experts, including Ms. Rivera's team. This board will audit and make transparent the decision-making processes behind algorithmic speech suppression. Not just on your platform, but across the digital frontier. Gasps echoed. No handcuffs. No acquittal. Something else entirely. A bridge. The gavel came down. But this time, it didn't feel like an end. It felt like an opening. 3 weeks later, Elon stood backstage at a digital ethics summit in Berlin. He was no longer there to dominate headlines. He was there to listen. In the front row, Anya took notes beside a professor from Ghana and a tech student from Brazil. What they were building wasn't easy. It wasn't flashy. But it was working. After his panel, Elon stepped off the stage. Someone asked him what changed. He paused, smiled softly. Someone made me realize I'd been shouting over silence. And the real power? It's in the pause. That night, Anya posted a single tweet. The world doesn't need more geniuses. It needs more listeners. More question askers. More bridges, fewer walls. We didn't win anything. We just remembered what truth sounds like. If you've ever felt like the world only listens to those with money, fame, or volume, this story is for you. Because truth doesn't need a microphone to matter, and change doesn't always arrive in the form of revolutions. Sometimes, it slips in quietly, through a pause, a confession, or the courage to share a table with someone who disagrees with you. Whether you're launching rockets or simply trying to be heard in a meeting room, remember this: power without empathy isolates, innovation without integrity erodes. But courage, when wrapped in humility, has the power to truly transform. If this story stirred something in you, here are 2 books worth diving into. The Practice by Seth Godin, a brilliant manifesto for anyone seeking to create meaningful work in a noisy, distracted world, reminding us it's not about going viral, but about showing up with intention and heart. And Braving the Wilderness by Brené Brown, a powerful guide to standing alone with integrity, finding true belonging, and staying grounded even when the world feels divided. So if you've ever felt small in rooms that talk too loud, don't forget, you don't need to shout to matter. You just need to stand firm, honest, and unshaken. And someone, somewhere, will hear you.